Welcome and thank you for joining us for Focus on Success with Cloudingo. Today we're going to be talking about updating records. We'll show you the various ways that you can update records in Cloudingo, show you how to set up different jobs for some real-life applications, and walk you through several scenarios. So the first thing we want to do is distinguish with two different areas or two different functions in Cloudingo that you can use for updating records. One of them is the import wizard. The import wizard has different ways to update your records, and this is most frequently used if you need to update a list of records with unique values on each one. The different ways that we'll talk about doing that would be to update existing records when you actually have the Salesforce record ID. And then we'll also talk about how you can use Cloudingo's import wizard to update records where you don't have the ID already. So we're going to use our matching function, similar to how you would when you're looking for identifying if the records already exist, to use a combination of fields to identify the record and then use the merge function to update the fields that you've chosen. So that's one set of updating options using the import wizard. The other way you can update records with Cloudingo is through the data maintenance dashboard. And on the data maintenance dashboard, there are actually 5 types of jobs. And we'll talk about how to build the filters to identify the records that you're wanting to update, and then how we can update them to the same value. Also, this is frequently used for standardizing records, and we'll show you an example of that. You will have the ability to build filters just to update matching records. So occasionally a customer will have a reason that they don't want to merge the records, but they want to build essentially a matching record filter like you would on the dedupe dashboard, and then just flag or update those records in one way or another. And finally, another way of editing or updating records would be through address validation, which is also found on the data maintenance dashboard. So next we're going to jump in and show you how this works. So let's go to our import wizard where we're going to begin. When we say to start the wizard, you're going to notice the ability under the actions to take to update existing records only, and it tells you that this requires the Salesforce ID. So the idea when you would want to use this is maybe you have a list and you're just updating and replacing a specific value on current records. You actually know the record ID for exactly where you want to update it. And so an example of that is if you get a list of the annual revenues for the previous year, and you want to update specific accounts with that. So what we could do, and we're going to show you just a small sample, we would choose the account, which is the object. We're not trying to import or scan to find the records. We know what the IDs are. So we're going to attach our list. And with this process, all you need are the 2 columns, the actual Salesforce ID of the record that you want to update. You would need the entire 18-digit ID, and also the field that we're updating or overriding with this information. And you can see that I had the 2 fields. They were named exactly the same, so they automatically mapped. When we go on to the next screen, we're going to see the preview. This is going to show you the fields just to make sure that you've mapped the information and that it is in fact what you're going to want to update, because with this method, once we move on after the next step, it's going to go directly to the import, to the update itself. So we want to review carefully here. And you can see I have my column with the account ID, and then I have the annual revenue that we're wanting to update. And so if we save and continue, there's nothing that we need to do to identify records. We knew exactly which records we wanted to update, and we're just going to get a confirmation when that process is completed. Now, of course, the other way that you can use this is if you did not have the ID. So pushed is showing us that it has actually pushed that update to the specific accounts we had identified. The other method, let's say I didn't know the specific account, but I knew their billing location and the account name and the state and the city. We could use a matching filter as if we were importing records. Process a merge once we've identified the correct records, and just make sure that you create a merge rule to properly update the records, depending on whether you're just replacing information or whether you need to concatenate it and do a combined list into a particular field. So now that we've seen what can be done on the import dashboard, we're going to go over to the data maintenance dashboard, which in most ways is much more robust. It's just that that import option gives you a way to load a list with a specific list of IDs and the values you want to update, or to update different information on the various records. And here you'll notice that the 3 filters that everyone has pre-configured, it comes as part of your license, are going to be populated on the dashboard. You'll have an address validation for leads, contacts, and accounts. Then when we use the create a new job, you'll be able to create any specific update or editing filter that you want. And so what we want to do is talk about some types of jobs that are available. So we're going to go in and say create a new job and show you exactly what it looks like from the beginning. So for maintenance type, you have the address validation. Deleting unique records would be that you can use a Salesforce list that you've already created and delete them using Cloudingo, or you could build a filter where you're deleting records. That's not really our topic today. We're talking about updating, but you would find it here on this data maintenance dashboard. The 3 types of updating jobs. You can update contacts from their accounts. And with this process, instead of just updating contacts with a specific value, it would allow you to say, we want to look at the account that this contact is affiliated with and update some information on the contact based on the account. We have a couple examples of that to show you. Another type of job is updating matching records. And this, as I say, is one scenario would be when you have a list of duplicates that for some reason you cannot merge at this time, but you would like to tag them as being duplicate records. Or you have another set of records that you want to update. And one example we're going to show you is if you're trying to create parent and child account structure. So we'll use this type of filter for that. Finally, updating unique records. And this is pretty much as wide as your imagination. You can choose to update any fields on your Salesforce records by building filters or using a report you've run and updating each of the records with the information. And we're going to walk through the steps and show you exactly how that's done. So now let's go back and take a look at some real examples. The first one we want to look at is just to update and standardize different values on some lead records, but this could be any object. So the purpose of this filter is to update the case for last name and first name so that the records are consistently using title case. We also want to update how the phone is formatted. Now remember, these filters can be automated just like your dedupe filters. So when you build some nice jobs to standardize your information or to update it on a routine basis, you will be able to go in and have them just run on a predetermined schedule whenever you would like them to. So we're going to walk you through the settings now. And as we come in, what you'll notice on the first page is that we've chosen, and it's grayed out because I already had it selected, to update unique records, and the object we're working with here would be leads. Now the filter name is what you're going to see on the dashboard. So you want it to be whatever you need to identify what's going to happen in this filter. The second tab, this is where we determine, well, which leads do we want to update in this filter? And just to give you an example, if you wanted to scan and update, since what we're doing is we're standardizing the information, I'm actually going to say all my leads that have a last name. And since last name is going to be a required field, that literally will make sure we're updating all of those lead records. But this is where you can use any combination of fields you want. If you were adding a campaign, you could say we want to find all of the leads where the status is new. Or if it's in a certain geography, you could say, and the state is Texas. So just like when you're deduping, at this point, this first blue column should look very familiar. You literally will have all of your fields for that object. And once again, you can search for anything that you would like. So you could add status or state. It's just drag and drop. And then you'll see how we determine, is it equal and you can enter as many values as you want, or are we just saying that it has to have a value or contains a value or has no value. So that's the way we're going to determine what records we want to update. Next, we're going to go on to tab 3, which is what fields are we actually trying to update. And all you do is you're going to say add a field. You'll have the opportunity to choose any of the fields on that object that you want to update. And once you've selected one, you do have several choices. One would be replace, find, and replace. For instance, if you know you have some erroneous information and you want to find all of the records with a certain value and then replace it with another one. You can also update fields to empty. Maybe you've tagged a field for a specific project. Now that project is over and you want to go ahead and clear that out. So that's another option. Or you can just tell us specifically what you want to update that field to. And of course, the gear is where you would be able to choose some of these formatting and standardizing options. So let's cover what those are now. For text formatting, you have the ability to go in and say use uppercase, where everything is all capital letters, lowercase, all lower letters, title case, where the first word contains a capitalized letter, and then just capitalize the first letter as if in a sentence. Maybe you just want to literally capitalize only the first letter in the whole field. Trimming type. This would allow you to remove those extra blank spaces from any fields you want. So the most common way this would be used would be to trim leading white spaces. In other words, the spaces before the word or the value for the field begins. And that's especially helpful if you need to run reports for fields and they're thrown off by blank spaces at the beginning of some of your values. Trimming white spaces at the end of the field takes off any extra spaces at the end if you need to for some reason. And trimming redundant white spaces. This would be, let's say you have a description field and something happened when you were importing and you have maybe 5 spaces between each word, or something that's throwing off the display or the amount of information in a field. Trimming redundant spaces says when there's more than one space between the words or the values, we're going to remove the extra space but leave a single space. So those are all options that you can do for any given field. For phone formatting, you have the ability to use parentheses. And when you choose to put the area code in parentheses, it's also going to add a hyphen between the exchange and the number. So you would have the area code in parentheses, then the exchange, the 3-digit exchange, and then a hyphen and your 4-digit number. Choosing to format a phone with dashes means instead of the parentheses and a hyphen, you would have a dash between each of those sections of the phone number. If you would prefer not to have any punctuation, just to separate with spaces, you can choose this option. Compacted means we don't want any punctuation. We just want the numbers to be written in sequence with no spaces in between. Now, when you choose area code in parentheses, it's going to be important for you to make one of these selections for the extension format. An X would tell Cloudingo whenever there's extension, we want to start it with the letter X and then have the extension written. EXT, of course, instead of the X is that abbreviation written out. And just allowing extension says you don't have to format it the same. It doesn't necessarily need to be either the X or the EXT. We just want to allow extensions. But it's important to select one of these if we're formatting the phone so that those extensions are not eliminated when we're doing the formatting. So it doesn't matter which you choose. You just do need to choose one so that the extension does not get removed. Now, looking at that with a couple of these fields, we can see for the phone, and we would just click the gear. We've got the area code in parentheses. We're going to say, let's use EXT for extension. For the first name, we're choosing title case and to trim leading white spaces. For the last name, we're choosing title case and to trim leading white spaces. And then just since these are leads instead of country, which we're not that concerned with, we would want to say for the company name. Let's also make sure that we're using title case. Now, when you save and run, this does not actually process the job, just like when you're working with dedupe jobs. This is just going to calculate totals for you so that you can review some of the records and make sure that that's exactly what you wanted to do before you actually process them. After you check a few, if you do, you can run automation if it's a large filter and just have it all processed. Or if you wanted to do them individually, you can do mass merging and do a page at a time, or individually select records that you wanted to update. Now, while that's calculating, let's take a look at some of the other types of jobs. One type of job we get asked, and this is done, so we'll go ahead and hop in and review our results. And so we're going to come in, and at first they're going to be displayed just like a little business card if you were to look at. And you'll be able to see the values from the dashboard and see a number of them. But if you click to review any one, they'll be displayed in a column so that you could review as many in more detail as you would like. In the interest of time, rather than waiting for those, let's move on to another filter because we have some very practical types of update jobs that we get lots of questions about. And we want to be sure we have time for covering all of them. One of the things that we've had a lot of questions about lately is what if you have records where the contact doesn't have an account, but you'd like to update it based on the website on the account as a match to the domain on the contact. And so I've built an example of that since we've had frequent questions from a number of customers, just to show you how that could work if you wanted to. Okay, so let's go on to ideas for updating missing accounts. If we come in, we're going to say edit so you can see the settings. Our target object is going to be the contact. That's what we're trying to update. And we're using an update from the account. And so our source is the account. Then the way we would want to match them up would be to find the email on the contact and match it to the website domain. And so email is my contact field. The field that we're using to identify the correct account would be the website. And our matching style is domain because an email is not the same thing as a website, but the domain match will serve that purpose well for this. We're not wanting to limit our records. Oh, I've used one where the email has a value because of course this wouldn't work if you don't have a domain to look for. And then the way we're going to update the account ID on the contact for those orphan contacts could be to say to use the master field, which is the account ID on the account. So this just gives you one system. You would want to move forward pretty cautiously and check a number of these before you go. But it has been a somewhat recently recurring issue that we've had questions about are customers who have a large number of orphaned contacts. They're wanting to use the domain on the email to identify an account with the same domain on the website. So that shows you how that function would work. Another type of job that we get questions for are how to update records where there's been no activity in a certain amount of time. So for an example, I've chosen a lead filter. And the two types of jobs that people want to do is maybe if there's no activity on a lead for over 180 days, you want to update the owner and you're going to assign it to a queue so it goes back in your process. Or you want to add a campaign. So the way you would set this up is we're going to build a filter. It's going to be update unique leads. The last activity is greater than or equal to X number of days. And I've chosen 180. If you have a faster cycle and you wanted to say 30 days or 90 days, literally whatever you want. You see, you have a wide range of different ways you can do it. But for this type of job, greater than a certain number of days will give you records that have had no activity in a long period of time. Then what fields do you want to update? Our example here is to update the owner ID to a specific ID. Another type of job you could do instead would be to assign these to a campaign, and maybe you want to do a combination. You want to put it back into sales queue, but also assign them to a campaign. And just to let you know, these two, tab 3 and tab 4, are mutually exclusive within a job. So you're not going to do both an update and add a campaign in a single job. That would be two jobs, but you do have the option to perform either function on your records in any specific update job. Now, the most common type of updating contacts from their affiliated accounts. Let's say that you have recently updated a large number of your accounts, and so they now have different owners, but you want to make sure that the contact is owned by the same person who owns the account. What you would do, and we'll look at those settings, is you can go in and build a filter where we're recognizing the account ID on the contact matches the account ID on the account. And it's when you add that field in, and these are going to be your contact fields, and then you choose, and it guides you right here to what account fields we want to match that to. And so we're matching the ID. And then what we want to do is update the owner on the contact to be the same person as our master field, which is our account ID. The last type of job that we just wanted to give you a little peek and an idea of how you can perform it, because it does come up on a periodic basis, is people who are wanting to assign a parent account ID to matching accounts. So it's going to take a little bit of work in advance to flag the records that you want to be your parent ID record. And then we're going to build the filter for how do we know which records we want to update. So I would recommend tagging the record ahead of time that you've designated as the parent ID. So we're going to say add a parent ID. And on tab 2, how do we want to determine which records we want to put in a group in that hierarchy? You might start with something tighter, like saying the account name needs to be an exact match. Eventually, you would want to go on to something wider, I'm sure. So you could do a company name clean, but just remember this is a much more robust, wider match than an exact match. So just be cognizant and check some records to make sure we're really updating the records that you want. And for the moment, we're just going to do an exact. Now, for what fields do we want to update? I'm saying only on the child records, right? Because we're not going to populate the parent account ID in itself, and the parent record is going to be the master. So I'm saying we want to update the child records, and this is the field we're going to update. We're going to populate the parent account ID. And how are we going to update it? We're going to update it with the master field, which is the account ID from the parent record. And so that's the update. Now we need to tell Cloudingo how to know which records to pull in, rather than you may not have the hierarchy set for all of them. And as a matter of fact, most frequently when people are setting this up, they maybe first will create a parent account or designate a parent account on a small group, like maybe 10 or 50 accounts. Work through this process, and when they're happy with it, move forward. So I just put as a way to designate the records that I wanted to work with. In the account description, I wrote parent account on the one that I want to be parent account. So I'm pulling in all groups where one record has this value. Now on the very first tab, this is how we're going to tell Cloudingo. Remember, we're saying to update the child records, not the master. So how do we know what's going to be our master? And that's where, back on the dedupe dashboard, I created a rule and called it my parent account rule, where I'm designating the master as the one that has parent account in that description field. So you could tag a field for is parent account or is parent, or however you want to designate it, and then you're going to create a rule to select that on the records. And then just to show you what that would look like, because we always want you to come in and review before you actually process an update, you could come in, and we're going to go to a smaller group before we go to the larger group. I can see this record is being chosen as the master. Just as I said I wanted it to. It has parent account in the description field. These two then would be my child records, and we're populating this account ID in the parent account ID field for both those records. And you can see the little red icon is telling me that's what's going to be updated. And so if I wanted to go ahead and update the records, I could. If you'd like to see what it looks like even in a larger group, the same is going to apply. I can see this is being chosen as the master. All of these others, it's going to have that ID from my parent record populated into the parent account ID field for all of the other records in this group. And of course, you can mass update. Which would select everything on a page, or you can always run automation. Now, when you choose to automate your jobs, remember that it's scheduled just exactly the way it would be for any other jobs on the dedupe dashboard. You're going to come in, tell us to schedule it. You'll have the choice of what frequency. Is this a one-time job? Do you want it to run hourly, daily, or weekly? And then once you've chosen daily or weekly, you'll notice that you have the same calendar settings for when would you like it to start. Say we want it to start Saturday. And maybe since it's the weekend, I'm going to do this at 9 in the morning. And yes, I would like to run the automated cleanup, which is actually going to process the job, as opposed to just calculating totals. So we hope this gave you some different ideas of how you can use Cloudingo to build filters to update information on your data maintenance dashboard, or to take a CSV file and do updates in the import wizard if you have a list of IDs and you're just updating a specific value, or if you need Cloudingo to identify the record that needs to be updated, but it's different values for each record. So once again, those would be reached either the import wizard was the first set of options we talked about, or the data maintenance dashboard is where you have the update unique records, update matching records, address validation, and those other standardization type of jobs that you want to perform. Thank you so much for joining us today. As always, remember that you can reach our support team anytime you need help by going to Contact Support. You'll have information where you can fill in your question and exactly what you're needing, and someone from the team will get back to you. And we always have our help page at help.cloudingo.com. And that's available anytime that you'd like to come in, type a question, review one of our former webinars, or register for some updating webinars in the future. So we appreciate your joining today. Our next section will be on October 23rd. That's going to be on how to delete records using Cloudingo. This is our help site that we were just showing you. You can register for new user webinars that happen once monthly on the first Thursday of every month. And as always, our support team is standing by and very willing and eager to help. So thank you for joining us and have a wonderful weekend.